What's up, guys? Welcome back to the infamous project. It is Friday afternoon, getting into our weekend here, and the weather's been great, and we finally got Project Tax Return up on the lift here. So I'm hoping that today's video is going to show you guys a lot of progress, and hopefully we're crossing the major milestone of the motor running in the car. And maybe, if we're lucky, maybe even the car will move underneath its own power today. No promises, because this is getting recorded beforehand. There's nothing scripted in my videos. It's just freestyling and hoping that everything is going to fall into place. Nothing ever goes as planned, but with that said, a little bit of persistence and some patience. Hopefully we can make some amazing headway on this car today. So, we got the car back on the ground as a roller. So the diff was installed, the fuel tank was installed. Everything was just kind of loosely bolted into place because all that work was done on the ground. So now that the car is finally up in the air, we can do things like tighten down and torque up our shocks, our control arms. Fuel tank is good, but you can see our fuel lines are dangling here. So that means we need to run some fuel lines. So I will be running nylon lines. So those will be getting run and installed front to back. Need to make sure that our brake lines are all hooked up. Here's the back side of our motor. So need to get our clutch fork installed, get our transmission installed, get our clutch cable and everything hooked up. Hopefully all this stuff will be pretty straightforward because I've already got the cross member all painted up and ready to go. So hoping that all this stuff goes smooth. One thing that I've already done is I already notched out the K-member a little bit right here. I shot it with some black paint already, so you can hardly even tell that there's a notch there. If you look on this side, you can see this lip right here is what I took off, and that's just so it can clear this deep oil pan that's on this motor. We do need to still get our power steering pump hooked up. I have my AC brackets out back getting painted up, which I just picked up yesterday. So that way we can get the AC and power steering hooked up on the front side of the motor. You can see our fuel lines are sitting here, and they're ready for connection once we run those nylon lines. And yeah, so you see a brake line just sitting here. So they were popped into place, but now just need to connect everything up. So let's see what we can get done today. That's the summary and the update of where we're at with this project. I am so far on schedule for the deadline. I told the customer it'd be done, worst case scenario, by the end of April, but I was gunning for it to be done by the middle of the month. So here we are, and hopefully we can get everything done. I'm looking out the window and it looks like there's some rain, which isn't good because I got some parts getting painted out there. So I gotta go check on those. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the infamous project, and this episode should be quite an exciting one. Reason being, we are extremely close to being able to get this car to fire. Managed to get our valve covers all sorted out, which we'll go over in this video, and managed to do something a little bit custom with them as well. So got those bolted back on. And it's time to get that upper intake manifold back on there. So we've solved all of our hood clearance issues by being able to put those factory valve covers on and getting rid of that massive spacer that was going between the upper and the lower intake. So without ado, let's kick off this episode, get things started, and most importantly, see if this car is going to start this episode. All right, guys, so digging right into things, you can see got the custom infamous project valve covers bolted on the car, and looks like we're in the clear in terms of all of our clearances and everything else. You look real closely right here, you can see two things. Number one, I removed the baffle in the filler neck area, and number two, I've ground out this area right here, which will give us the clearance that we need on this rocker. Similarly, on the other side, there's no baffle to remove, but I did grind out this section here. So we'll have plenty of clearance for our rockers underneath the stock valve covers. So now it's time to go ahead and bolt on the upper intake manifold again. So you can see it's sitting underneath here. put brand new valve cover gaskets in with those valve covers. And you can see this is sort of like a low gloss finish with, I guess this is just kind of the brushed metal look underneath. So I was kind of trying to tie that in with the valve covers, but everything should be good to go here. My only concern is this guy might not have the clearance on the hood, but we'll test that out. This isn't a big deal because this is capped anyways, but we will cross that bridge when we get there. You can see behind me here is the massive spacer that was in between the upper and the lower. So this guy is gone and we should have all of the clearance required that we need. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that we have a good gasket between one of these two pieces. If not, both of them being good. Intake gaskets are usually pretty good in terms of being able to be reused, but just make sure that you have no cracks or no tears if you are going to attempt to reuse your gasket. But in this case, everything was so new in this motor, I probably could have even used the valve cover gaskets, but I had this new set laying around, so I just went with those. That's about it. Got the heater core lines hooked up at the back, so that's out of the way. One important thing when we bolt on the intake is to make sure that we get our ground wire in the back of the motor sorted out and that we get a ground strap going to the firewall as well. I'm going to go ahead and blow the motor down with some compressed air, just because the car has been sitting here, and even though I had taped up the ports on the lower intake manifold, you just want to make sure that no debris is getting into your motor unnecessarily. So go ahead, blow it down. We'll get in there, set the intake in place, and start getting it bolted down. All right, so we practically have everything buttoned up. Vacuum lines are run. All of the last of the electrical connectors are hooked up, and valve covers are tightened down. Intake is tightened down with the exception of one bolt. With the spacer being removed, they were extra long bolts, and I only found one that would fit on the top there. So I need one more on the back side. Shouldn't stop us from being able to fire the motor though. So I'll get the right size bolts in there. We should be good to go. Now I'm just actually dealing with the throttle cable set up here, and got a bracket off another intake. For some reason this one was off. I must have used it on another motor. And one little trick is I actually cut the end off of this guy that holds the cable for the kickdown cable if you have an automatic, and it's really just kind of adding bulk to this bracket. So I just cut that off with angle or cutoff grinder and put it in the blasting cabinet. So got this all cleaned up. So I'm going to paint this a nice low gloss black, and we'll be able to get that installed and get our bracket and throttle cables all hooked up. Check underneath the lift before you put the vehicle down. Well, I had to get something mid-video halftime entertainment.
Just, if you're gonna f something up, you might as well do a great job, and I did a fantastic job. Just
well, it'll buff out. There is something that I've pulled off recently while I'm working on the alternator bracket and the accessories. I pulled off this BBK intake tube. I just could not stand the chrome. Chrome don't get you home. The blue couplers are driving me a little nuts as well, even though the block of the motor is blue. I don't know, there's just something. Actually, the fuel rails, BBK fuel rails are blue as well. I'm gonna see if I can track down some red couplers, but that's the least of my worries. The biggest worry I had was this guy right here. And a lot of people try and paint chrome and they don't prep chrome properly. Yes, you can paint it, you know, sandblasting it down. You can sand it down, which I've been doing here I started with 80 grit, worked my way up to about a 400. and I'm going to use self-etching primer. So the biggest thing when you're painting chrome is get rid of all of the shine. This almost looks like a brushed aluminum now, which is kind of the look that you're going for. I still have a little bit of sanding that I need to do, but this is going to go black, and I think it's going to look a million times better. I did drill out the 2 little rivets for the BBK intake plaque that was on here. So the question will be, I might fill those up if I can. Maybe, I don't know if I could try my luck just dabbing some weld in there and grinding it out. Either way, fill these up, clean up this tube, get it painted. All right, there we go. No more holes. Opted for breaking out the MIG welder, and a couple little spots, you know, trying to feed the wire slow, use a low heat, so don't cause too much damage, but everything looks to be pretty good here. So finish sanding this down a little bit more, get some primer on it, then some paint. This thing will look completely different and not that god-awful chrome. Getting our transmission ready to get installed into the car, and had this B&M short throw shifter, which should help making shifting a breeze. It's one thing that I was never impressed with the Foxbodies was the factory shifters. You know, at least a short handle makes a big difference, but those factory things, like honestly, it might as well as be one of those big, long Hearst style shifters, which I'm also not a fan of. They have their place, but just not a fan. So I put some gasket maker in between the shifter and the transmission here, tightening everything down. And I'm going to put the fluid in the transmission once it's in the car, just to make my life easier. In case it gets tilted for whatever reason, I don't want any fluid coming out of the tail stalks. Despite putting brand new convertible style motor mounts in, so you can see this guy here, everything is lined up flush. You know, the pin is in the hole in the back there, and that's going on good. Everything is all right. On this side, look at that gap that I have. Now, that pin needs to actually go back. It's actually quite a ways, and that oil pan is pretty much level. So my concern is that sitting in the right spot? So I'm going to loosen off the 2 main bolts that are holding the motor mount on, and see what's going on here. But hopefully this thing will level out and sit straight. Got it. So we loosened off the 2 main bolts that hold the motor mounts to the bottom side of the block, and jacked up or supported the oil pan, got a big pry bar in, and just shifted the mount over enough so that pin could fit in the hole. And everything seems to be sitting properly in place now. So we'll go ahead, torque up our motor mounts, transmission mounts, cross member, get the drive shaft in, and then run our fuel lines. All right, drive shaft time. All right, guys, so just doing the drive shaft bolts now. Put a little bit of blue thread locker on there. Don't recommend using red, because red does get pretty hard and you might hate yourself the next time that you need to take your drive shaft out. So blue does the job. And go ahead, get these torqued up. And from there, pretty much going to be ready to start running some fuel lines. All right, drive shaft is all torqued up, rear end, control arms, shocks. I got the brake line block all hooked up, so everything back here is torqued, is tight, it's good to go. And same goes for our transmission cross member and our motor mounts and everything else. So now fuel line time. So we're going to be running this nylon line front to back, and we'll be retaining factory style connectors on there. And this will just make our lives easier and more versatile.
Automated, that's when you stop.
Like that?
Yeah. You don't force it when it bottoms out. Just stop. Now, pull your tool out and release. You never want to release it when it's inside.
All right, so there we have it, guys. Fuel lines in the front are all hooked up. And important thing, always make sure that you have your sleeves and your clamps and everything pushed onto your hose first, because once you put your pressure fitting on, you're not going to be able to put anything else on top of that. So not gonna lie, I had to redo the first one because I put the clamp on and then I was like, oops, I forgot to put on my protective hose over the top. So I didn't want to have to slit the hose and try and slide it over. So I just popped the clamp off and redid it. That's how you do the nylon compression fittings. Pretty straightforward. Make sure that you have the length that you want. Lubricate the fitting first before pressing it in to the tube. And that's about it. So going to go ahead, we'll get the rear wrapped up because we'll have to do the line that goes out from the fuel filter, which is the main line, and then the return. So we'll get that all buttoned up, and we'll be in a position to plug that fuel pump relay back in and see if this thing is going to fire up on its own. So we got our fuel lines all hooked up, and they are running all down the factory location, through the inner fender, down through here, and around down through the pinch welds, up and around, right through there, up and over. Then you can see our fuel filter there with our new compression fittings that we've put on. So everything should be good. I did reach up and I plugged in the fuel pump relay. Now it's the moment of truth. I'm going to hit the key, see if that fuel pump turns on. So that's going to be the first element of success, because we don't know if that wiring was working. And the second thing is to make sure that there's no leaks in our fuel system. So I'm going to go ahead, hit the key, see what happens. Oh, I could hear it. All right, so I hit the key a couple times, checking all of our fittings. Everything seems to be good in the back here. Primed it about 4 times, so it should be enough to get fuel up to the main rail. So I'll put the car down and see if it fires up.
The little crackle got us going. We were like,
Well, that's
"Ooh,
something.
ooh,
It's
yeah."
getting really loud here in a second.
It's always the little things. Like, who would think? Forgot to put fuel in it.
Sweet. Idle's a little high.
Yeah, but you can't really set shit up until you get the exhaust on it.
No. The O2.
Fucking vibrates. I feel my legs.
Yeah, I feel good. It's kind of like that 383 out there. There we have it, guys. Friday was a pretty successful day. Not only did we get the car started, but we just knocked out so many little nitty-gritty tasks. So everything from getting that transmission installed, cross member, torquing down the motor mounts, fixing that little issue with the one not sitting in the right spot. Got all of our rear end torqued down, tightened up, got the drive shaft installed, got our fuel lines run and hooked up, despite forgetting that there was no fuel in the tank. Easy fix, run to the gas station, and here we go. So it's alive. This thing is pretty much ready to move underneath its own power. I do need to just clip the clutch cable into the quadrant since that's out, and need to fill up the transmission with some fluid, and that's pretty much it. And it's just going to be nitty gritty and working out all the little bugs. We got to get the front end, new front end painted up, get the stock hood painted up and put onto the car. Finished getting the door moldings and the 5.0 emblem on this side, as I had only got it done on the driver's side so far. And lastly, we need to finish up our accessories and our cooling system here. So got the brackets all dried up from paint for the AC and the power steering. So we'll get that on there, be able to get the belt on, get our coolant system all filled up. So just last little bit. Almost forgot the brakes. Need to get those brakes hooked up because the car obviously needs to be able to stop. But with that said, nothing more fulfilling than at the end of the week, you hear the car, your project that you've been working on fire up for the first time. And what a great feeling, great way to end the week. So hopefully you guys have a great weekend, and whatever project you're working on is just as successful as I had today with this.